all women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus 8. The Penis Envy Pyramid. Dissecting the Feminist Complex, written by Conrad Riker. Available now? Links in description. Anti-feminist gender studies, the practical anatomy of a modern delusion. I want you to hold 2 thoughts in your mind simultaneously because the friction between them is going to start a fire. First thought, male attention is the most valuable currency on earth. It builds civilizations, funds industries, writes poetry, moves mountains, and let us be honest, keeps the entire attention economy from Silicon Valley to OnlyFans solvent. Second thought, according to every feminist theorist, lifestyle columnist, HR director, and sociology professor with a podcast, when a man offers this currency on his own terms, when he approaches, compliments, pursues, courts, or simply notices a woman with unambiguous interest, he is desperate, creepy, objectifying, or pathetically inauthentic. Yet when a woman extracts the same currency, when she monetizes the gaze, sells proximity to her body, weaponizes desire for subscription revenue, or trades sexual access for resources, she is empowered, owning her narrative and reclaiming her agency. Pause. Smell that? That is the unmistakable stench of a rigged game pretending to be a market. Now, I know what happens when you press this point. I have watched it 100 times, Doctor.
Winona, let us call the composite feminist apologist by her rightful name, the doctor of feelings who never met a syllogism she could not strangle in the crib, will rush to the microphone with her defense.
She will say the difference is power asymmetry. She will say selling is autonomous because the seller chooses her terms, while buying is coercive because the buyer imposes his desire. She will deploy words like consent and agency, like a sorcerer waving dead chicken bones, hoping the audience mistakes the vigor of the gesture for the validity of the spell. And if you are not trained, if you have not sharpened your mind on the whetstone of dialectic, she will rattle you. You will feel the verdict arriving before the argument has been heard. That is by design. That is what private logic does when it dresses in academic robes. It makes you feel the conclusion before you can examine the premises. But here is why her entire defense collapses under audit, and why this essay is going to be the autopsy. The argument fails at the level of grammar before it even reaches logic. Define selling, define buying, define currency. If male attention is the commodity and the entire culture explicitly treats it as such, from advertising to Tinder algorithms to the dowries of antiquity, then the act of offering it is by definition a market action. And the moral character of that action cannot depend on the sex of the actor without violating the most basic rule of justice. Same act, same standard. If I trade my labor for wages, I am a worker. If you trade the product of your body for my wages, you are an entrepreneur. But if I offer the very attention whose withdrawal you fear, I am a supplicant. If I withhold it, I am negging. If I give it freely, I am simping. If I attach conditions, I am controlling. Every exit is booby-trapped. Every door is labeled guilty. That is not a market. That is a tribunal. What follows is a precision dissection.
I'm going to take Dr. Wynona's best argument, the strongest version, not the straw doll, and I'm going to run it through the full grammar logic rhetoric gauntlet. I will define every term. I will test every inference.
I will expose every hidden premise, every equivocation, every motte and Bailey retreat, every emotional sleight of hand that converts I feel into therefore it is. And when the bones of her position are laid bare on the table, you will see what is underneath. Not a theory of liberation, not a philosophy of equality, but a permission structure for one sex to consume the currency of the other, while criminalizing the hand that reaches for the bill. The question I am asking is not provocative. It is devastating. And the reason it cannot be answered is the reason it must be asked. The question, if male attention is the currency of the market, why is selling it inauthentic but buying it empowering? Why it pops the ideology? The theory demands women choose between authenticity, defined by the observer, and valuation, defined by the target. But since male validation is a biological and social reality for all women, labeling it performative is an unfalsifiable ad hominem that punishes the outcome, male attention, rather than the action, the child version. Why is it bad for a girl to sell her toys to boys, but good for a boy to buy them? Follow-up questions. Who defines the value of the currency? Is the seller responsible for the market's price? If the buyer is the prize, why is the seller desperate? Can you be authentic if you are paid to be fake? Why is the man's purchase ambition and the woman's sale submission? Does the label change if the woman keeps the money? Is the pick-me critique a tax on female agency? Why is the male gaze a structure, but the female gaze a personality flaw? Access Question Bank. The definition of authenticity versus performance. Best question, if authenticity is defined by the absence of male validation, how does a woman live in a world where men are the primary judges of social value? Is authenticity a state of being or a performance judged by other women? Grammar, logical basis, definition why it lands, it forces the critic to admit that authenticity is a social construct, not an internal truth, thereby undermining the moral superiority of the non-pick-me woman. Can a woman be pick-me if she doesn't know she is being judged? Grammar, logical basis. Falsifiability, why it lands. It highlights the absurdity of judging internal motivation based on external behavior, a classic mind-reading fallacy. The asymmetry of male gaze versus female judgment. Best question, why is the male gaze a structural force to be analyzed, but the female gaze a personal failing to be mocked? If men are the prize, why is the woman who wants the prize desperate, but the man who wants the prize ambitious? Grammar, logical basis, double standard why it lands. It exposes the gendered valuation of desire, showing that pick-me is a pejorative for female desire directed at men. Does the pick-me label require the woman to be wrong about her desires, or just wrong about who she desires? Grammar, logical basis, equivocation, why it lands. It separates the object of desire from the act of desiring, revealing that the critique is often about the object, men, rather than the action. The unfalsifiability of the pick-me label. Best question, what specific action would a pick-me woman take that would prove she is not pick-me? If a pick-me woman rejects a man, is she being pick-me for rejecting him, or authentic for rejecting him? Grammar, logical basis, non-contradiction, why it lands. It demonstrates that the label is applied regardless of behavior, making it a tautology rather than a critique. Is the pick-me label a description of behavior or a judgment of character? Grammar, logical basis, predication, why it lands. It shifts the debate from observable facts to unobservable essence, where the critic holds all the power. The economic value of male validation. Best question, if male validation is a scarce resource, is pick-me behavior a rational economic strategy or an irrational social mistake? Why is the woman who trades validation for status selling out, but the man who trades status for validation buying in? Grammar, logical basis, reciprocal standard, why it lands. It frames the pick-me critique as a class war against women who accept the market value of their attention. Does the pick-me label punish women for accepting the terms of the patriarchal market? Grammar, logical basis, burden of proof. Why it lands, it forces the critic to explain why the market itself isn't the problem, but the woman's participation in it is, the exclusion of male agency in the dynamic. Best question. If the pick-me woman is performing for men, why are men not also performing for women? And why is their performance not labeled pick-me? Why is the woman's desire for male approval inauthentic, but the man's desire for female approval natural? Grammar, logical basis, double standard, why it lands. It exposes the biological essentialism that underpins the pick-me critique. Is the man a passive audience or an active co-conspirator in the pick-me performance? Grammar, logical basis, causality, why it lands. It restores male agency, showing that the dynamic is mutual, not unilateral. The contradiction of choice in patriarchal markets. Best question. If women have choice in the patriarchal market, why is choosing male validation, pick me, but choosing female solidarity authentic? If choice is good, why is the wrong choice pick me? Grammar, logical basis, non-contradiction, why it lands. It highlights the tension between liberal individualism and conservative social judgment. Is pick me a choice or a condition?
Grammar, logical basis. Definition, why it lands. It clarifies whether the critique is about agency or essence. Dr. Winona attempts the defense.
When her mood became law, on authenticity, complicity, and the pick-me discourse, by Dr.
Winona, feminist Marxist, PhD, professor of gender studies, High Coven member. It has become fashionable, even within certain self-described feminist circles, to question the validity of the pick-me discourse.
The suggestion loudly whispered by apologists for the patriarchy is that identifying a woman as a pick-me constitutes some form of policing, some mean girl cruelty dressed in theory. I want to be very clear about something. This suggestion is not only wrong, it is dangerous. It is the kind of pseudo-liberatory rhetoric that ultimately serves male supremacy by disarming women of our most essential critical tool, each other. Now, certain libertarian adjacent voices have posed what they consider a devastating question. If male attention is the currency of the market, why is selling it inauthentic but buying it empowering? The framing is deliberately obtuse. Men who pursue female validation do so from a position of structural entitlement. They are exercising a privilege the system already grants them. Women who perform for male approval are responding to coercive incentives they did not create. These are categorically different acts. To call them equivalent is to flatten power into a transaction and pretend the ledger is balanced. It is not. It has never been balanced. The asymmetry is the entire point. But, and here is where compassion must guide us, the pick-me woman is not our enemy. She is, in fact, a victim of the very system we are dismantling. Her behavior is a trauma response, a survival strategy under conditions of structural male dominance. Naming her behavior is not shaming her. It is naming the pattern. If she experiences discomfort upon being named, that discomfort is productive. Growth is uncomfortable. I remember, in my own consciousness-raising years, how painful it was to recognize how many of my own preferences had been shaped by patriarchal conditioning. I am better for that pain. We all are. What I find genuinely troubling, and I want to signal this clearly, is the suggestion that the pick-me label is unfalsifiable. This could not be further from the truth. The evidence is behavioral, consistent, and observable. We know it when a woman's expressed interests shift depending on male presence. We know it when she positions herself in opposition to other women for male benefit. These are documentable patterns, not mind reading. If a critic demands a single isolatable act that would prove pick-me status, they are demanding a standard of evidence applied to no other sociological phenomenon. We do not require this of any other structural critique. The demand itself is a deflection. Some have asked whether men, too, should be subject to this critique, whether the man who curates himself for female approval is equally authentic. The answer is nuanced but firm. Men who perform for women are operating within a different incentive structure. Their performance does not reinforce a matriarchal system because no such system exists. At worst, their behavior is personally irritating. It is not structurally consequential in the way pick-me behavior is, because pick-me behavior reinforces patriarchy by dividing women. it recruits women into the enforcement of their own subordination. Male pick-me behavior, by contrast, is an individual peccadillo. The scales are simply not comparable. I will concede, because I am rigorous, that the discourse can be misapplied. Any critical tool can be weaponized by the malicious, but the existence of misuse does not invalidate the framework. We do not abandon the concept of gaslighting because TikTok teenagers misuse it. We do not discard trauma because it has been diluted. The framework is sound. What it requires is responsible application by those with the theoretical literacy to wield it correctly, by which I mean, frankly, those of us trained in the discipline. What concerns me most, and I will name this without euphemism, is the way this discourse has been turned inward, weaponized by women against other women in ways that are not accountable to structural analysis. When a woman calls another woman a pick-me simply because she dislikes her, without doing the work of contextualizing the behavior within patriarchal incentives, she is engaging in horizontal hostility. But the solution is not to abandon the term. The solution is to theorize it more rigorously, to build a more sophisticated, more accountable framework for identifying patriarchal performance. And that is precisely the work we are doing. So when someone asks with that signature male logic smugness, what specific action would a pick-me woman take that would prove she is not pick-me, the answer is simple. She would stop performing for the male gaze. She would allow her preferences, opinions, and self-preservation to be shaped by something other than male approval. And if she cannot do that, if every corner of her identity turns out to be curated for consumption, then the label applies regardless of whether she consents to it. Her internal experience of authenticity is not dispositive. Structural patterns are dispositive. That is not cruelty. That is analysis. And if the analysis stings, perhaps it is worth asking why. Theory critique. When her mood became law, the secret constitution of pick-me discourse. The question. Here is the question that ends the debate. If male attention is the currency of the market, why is selling it inauthentic, but buying it empowering? Read it again. Sit with it. Not because it is clever, though it is, but because it is fair. It applies the same standard to both parties in a transaction and asks why the judgment differs. That is all it does. And that is why it cannot be answered by the ideology it targets. Currency, a medium of exchange recognized as valuable by participants in a market. If male attention operates as currency, something women seek, trade for, compete over, then the market logic applies symmetrically to buyers and sellers. Selling, offering something of value in exchange for something desired. In the context of pick-me discourse, this means a woman presenting herself in ways calibrated to attract male attention. Buying, acquiring something of value by offering something desired in return. A man who curates himself, his physique, his income, his confidence, his status, to attract female attention is buying that attention with his own currency. Authentic, consistent with one's genuine preferences, unperformed for external validation. Empowering, increasing one's agency, status, or freedom. Now the question's logical structure. P1. If male attention is currency, then women who seek it are sellers and men who seek female attention are buyers in structurally equivalent transactions. P2. The pick-me critique labels the seller unauthentic, but does not label the buyer unauthentic. P3. No principle is offered that distinguishes selling from buying on the axis of authenticity. T. The pick-me critique applies an asymmetrical standard without justification, which is a double standard. This is not a rhetorical flourish, it is a formal objection. The question demands what logicians call a differentia, the specific criterion that separates the condemned act from the condoned one. Without that differentia, the judgment is arbitrary, or worse, it is motivated by something other than the principle it claims to serve. The ideology cannot produce that differentia. Watch what happens when it tries.
Why the ideology cannot answer it. Dr. Winona attempts an answer.
Here is her core move. Men who pursue female validation do so from a position of structural entitlement. They are exercising a privilege the system already grants them. Women who perform for male approval are responding to coercive incentives they did not create. These are categorically different acts. This sounds sophisticated. It is, in fact, a textbook example of what classical logicians called begging the question, assuming the very framework in dispute as evidence for that framework. Here is the circular structure laid bare. P1, patriarchy, means male attention is structural power. P2, women who seek male attention are therefore seeking power, which is coercive, not authentic. C, therefore women who seek male attention are pick-me, and men who seek female attention are not equivalent, because patriarchy. The conclusion, women seeking male attention is categorically different from men seeking female attention, depends entirely on the premise patriarchy makes these acts different. But the premise is precisely what the question challenges. The question says, show me, without assuming your framework that these acts differ. The ideology says, they differ because my framework says they differ.
This is not analysis. This is dogmatics wearing analysis as a disguise, but let us steelman the position more generously than Dr. Winona deserves.
Perhaps the argument is this. Structural power asymmetry means that identical surface-level acts carry different meanings depending on who performs them. A billionaire buying a painting and a starving artist buying bread are both buying, but the acts carry different moral weight because of structural position. Fair enough. But this analogy requires that the underlying market exists and that both parties are participating in it. If male attention is the currency, then both men and women are market participants. The structural argument explains why participation might carry different costs, but it does not explain why participation carries different authenticity judgments. A poor person who works hard for money is not called inauthentic for wanting it. A rich person who works hard for more money is not called authentic for wanting it.
The structural position changes the moral weight of the act, not the authenticity of the desire. Dr. Winona has conflated two distinct categories.
The moral evaluation of an act given structural context, which is legitimate sociological analysis, and the authenticity of a person's desire, which is a claim about internal psychological state. The pick-me label is the latter masquerading as the former. It does not say this woman's behavior has different structural consequences than a man's equivalent behavior. It says this woman is inauthentic, a judgment about her soul, her integrity, her selfhood, and that is why the question is lethal. It forces the ideology to choose option A, abandon the authenticity claim. Admit that pick-me is a structural observation about market behavior, not a psychological verdict. This strips the term of its polemical power. It becomes dry sociology, not a weapon. Option B, defend the authenticity claim. But then the reciprocal standard applies. If seeking validation from the opposite sex makes a woman inauthentic, it must make a man inauthentic too. And the ideology refuses to say that, because doing so would pathologize normal male behavior and reveal that the entire framework is not about authenticity at all, but about policing female desire toward men. The ideology wants option A's intellectual respectability and option B's rhetorical force. It wants to be structural analysis when challenged and personal indictment when wielding. This is the moat and Bailey, and we will map it shortly. There is a deeper problem. The question exposes something the ideology cannot afford to admit, that male validation is a real good, not a patriarchal construct, not a false consciousness, a real biological, social, psychological good that women genuinely desire and genuinely benefit from. If male validation were not a real good, seeking it would not require explanation. It would be obviously irrational, like collecting bottle caps. The very fact that the pick-me critique exists as a critique, as something that requires naming, shaming, and correcting, proves that the behavior it targets is natural enough to be tempting. You do not need a theory to explain why people do things nobody wants to do. And if male validation is a real good, then women who seek it are responding rationally to real incentives.
Calling that response inauthentic is not analysis. It is resentment dressed as theory. Dr. Winona's fallacy map, Fallacy 1, Moat and Bailey. Definition: advancing a controversial claim, the Bailey, but retreating to an uncontroversial version, the moat, when challenged, then re-expanding once pressure lifts. Dr. Winona's Bailey, pick-me women are inauthentic.
Their preferences are not their own. Their identities are curated for consumption. This is a strong psychological claim about internal states. Dr.
Winona's martyr, pick-me behavior is a documentable pattern of behavioral shifts depending on male presence. This is a weak observational claim anyone could verify.
Why it fails, the mort is trivially true. People modify behavior in different social contexts. This is not pathology, it is social cognition. Every human being who has ever lived modifies self-presentation based on audience. The doctor does not call a man who is more formal at work than at home inauthentic. She reserves that term for women who modify behavior in the presence of men specifically. The moat explains nothing the Bailey claims. Fallacy 2. Unfalsifiability. Kafka trap variant. Definition. A claim that cannot be proven false because every possible disconfirmation is reinterpreted as confirmation. Dr.
Winona's version, if she cannot stop performing for the male gaze, if every corner of her identity turns out to be curated for consumption, then the label applies, regardless of whether she consents to it.
Why it fails. The subject cannot disprove the charge. If she says, "I genuinely like football," the response is, "You've been conditioned." If she says, "I chose this independently," the response is, "Your experience of authenticity is not dispositive." If she says, "I reject male validation," the response is, "That's a trauma response." Every denial confirms the diagnosis. This is not structural analysis. This is theological and unfalsifiable doctrine of original sin, where the sin is wanting male attention and repentance is impossible, because the sin is defined as the inability to recognize one's sin. I will put this as a formal syllogism. P1, a pick-me, is a woman who performs for male validation. P2, if she denies performing, she is performing because denial is a strategy. P3, if she stops performing, she is still performing because stopping is itself a response to male judgment. C, every woman is always already a pick-me, and the term has no discriminative power. When a concept applies to everything, it explains nothing. Fallacy 3, special pleading, definition. Applying a standard to one case while exempting another comparable case without justification. Dr.
Winona's version. Men who perform for women are operating within a different incentive structure. Their performance does not reinforce a matriarchal system because no such system exists. Why it fails? The question was not about whether matriarchy exists. The question was about authenticity. Dr. Winona has swapped the criterion mid-argument.
The original judgment was about authenticity. Pick-me equals inauthentic. The defense shifts to structural impact, reinforces patriarchy. These are different claims.
A man who curates himself for female approval may be entirely inauthentic by the same behavioral standard, and Dr. Winona does not deny this. She simply says it doesn't matter because structural reasons.
But then the term pick-me is not about authenticity at all. It is about political loyalty, and calling political disloyalty inauthenticity is pure newspeak. Fallacy 4, appeal to authority, credentialism.
Definition, deferring to the speaker's expertise rather than addressing the argument. Dr. Winona's version, the framework is valid when wielded correctly, by which I mean, frankly, those of us trained in the discipline.
Why it fails. The truth of a proposition does not depend on who utters it. A syllogism either holds or it does not. A definition either tracks reality or it does not. The doctor's credential is a certificate of consensus within a specific academic subculture, not evidence that her claims survive logical scrutiny. This is the grammarian's point. Define your terms, test your logic, and let the argument stand or fall on its merits. Credentials are not arguments. They are social proof, which, ironically, is exactly what the pygmy critique claims to be dismantling. Fallacy 5, loaded language, emotional manipulation. Definition, using emotionally charged vocabulary to preempt rational evaluation. Dr.
Winona's lexicon, structural capitulations, patriarchal conditioning, curated for consumption, performing for the male gaze, survival strategy, trauma response.
Why it fails, each phrase begs the question by embedding the conclusion in the description. Structural capitulation presupposes that the behavior constitutes surrender to an oppressive system rather than, say, a woman genuinely enjoying football. Curated for consumption presupposes that male attention is degrading to receive. Trauma response presupposes that the desire for male validation is pathological rather than natural. The language does the work, the argument cannot. Fallacy 6. Equivocation on authenticity. Definition. Using a key term in different senses within the same argument. The slip. Dr.
Winona uses authentic to mean A, consistent with one's genuine preferences, the standard definition, and B, not shaped by patriarchal incentives, her ideological definition. These are not the same.
A woman may genuinely prefer to be attractive to men preference, while also having that preference shaped by socialization. Influence B. The fact that a preference is socially influenced does not make it inauthentic. If it did, every culturally acquired preference from enjoying jazz to valuing democracy would be inauthentic. The doctor slides between these senses to make natural desire look like false consciousness. Fallacy 7. Category error. Definition. Attributing a property to something that cannot bear that property due to its category. The error, Dr.
Winona treats women as a collective subject with a collective interest, our most essential critical tool, each other.
Then makes individual judgments about individual women based on whether they serve that collective interest. But authenticity is a property of individuals, not collectives. A woman's preferences are hers, not the property of her sex. Judging an individual woman's authenticity by whether her choices serve women's interests is a category error. It applies a collective standard to an individual attribute. Fallacy 8. Circularity in definition. Definition, defining a term using the term itself or using a synonym that presupposes the definition. The circle, pick me, equals a woman who centers male validation as the organizing principle of her public selfhood. But centers male validation is defined behaviorally as performing in ways calibrated to attract male attention. And how do we know her performance is calibrated for male attention rather than being a genuine preference? Because it fits the pattern of pick-me behavior. The definition presupposes the diagnosis, the axis-by-axis Socratic cross-examination. Now I will press each axis. For each, I will state the question, explain its grammatical and logical force, and show why the ideology cannot survive it. Axis I, the definition of authenticity versus performance. Best question. If authenticity is defined by the absence of male validation, how does a woman live in a world where men are the primary judges of social value? Grammatical basis. This is a question of definition and coherence. If authentic means not shaped by male judgment, and male judgment pervades social life, then authenticity is defined as the absence of something ubiquitous. A concept that requires the impossible is not a concept. It is a standard designed to produce failure. Logical basis. This is a reductio ad absurdum. The ideology's definition of authenticity entails that no woman can be authentic under normal social conditions. But a concept that applies to no one in the population is vacuous. It has no discriminative power.
It cannot distinguish between women, which means it cannot do the work the pick-me label requires. Why Dr. Winona cannot answer.
She would have to define authenticity in positive terms. Here is what an authentic woman looks like, and that definition would either be so broad that it includes pick-me behavior or so narrow that it excludes virtually all women. Either way, the term collapses. Follow-up question, is authenticity a state of being or a performance judged by other women?
Why this detonates? If authenticity is internal, then Dr. Winona cannot assess it from the outside. She cannot know whether a woman genuinely enjoys football or is performing.
If authenticity is assessed by external behavior, then it is socially constructed by the observer, which means Dr.
Winona and her allies are the ones performing the judgment, and the pick-me label is their performance of authority over other women. The hunter becomes the hunted. The labeler becomes the labeled.
Axis 2. The asymmetry of male gaze versus female judgment. Best question, if men are the prize, why is the woman who wants the prize desperate, but the man who wants the prize ambitious? Grammatical basis, this question tests reciprocity of predication. In grammar, if two subjects engage in the same act, the predicate should apply equally unless a differentia is provided. Wanting a prize is the act. Desperate and ambitious are the predicates. The question asks for the differentia. None is forthcoming that does not beg the question. Logical basis, this is a double standard test. Formally, P1, desiring a socially valued good, is either virtuous, ambitious, or vicious, desperate. P2, men desiring female attention are labeled ambitious. P3, women desiring male attention are labeled desperate. P4, no principled distinction between the desires is offered, only structural context, which does not address the virtue of the desire itself. C, the asymmetry is unjustified, special pleading. Why Dr.
Winona cannot answer. She tries structural entitlement versus coercive incentives. But this answers a different question. It addresses the structural context of desire, not the moral quality of desire itself.
The question asks why the desire is judged differently. The answer addresses the environment in which desire occurs. This is a category error, explaining a moral judgment with a sociological observation. Follow-up question. Why is the male gaze a structural force to be analyzed, but the female gaze a personal failing to be mocked? Why this detonates? The pick-me discourse is the female gaze, the judgment of women by women. If the male gaze is oppressive because it reduces women to objects of visual consumption, then the female gaze that reduces women to pick-me's is structurally identical. It judges women's behavior against a standard set by other women for the benefit of other women's status. The doctor will protest that the female gaze is accountable to structural analysis, but accountability to one's own theory is not accountability. It is incestuous self-justification. Axis 3. The unfalsifiability of the pick-me label. Best question, if a pick-me woman rejects a man, is she being pick-me for rejecting him or authentic for rejecting him? Grammatical basis. This tests the law of non-contradiction. A term cannot coherently apply to both a thing and its opposite. If accepting male attention makes you pick-me, performing for the male gaze, and rejecting male attention also makes you pick-me, strategically withholding to seem desirable, then the term has no stable referent. It is pure equivocation, logical basis. This is the unfalsifiability challenge formalized. Let me lay it out. Scenario A, woman accepts male attention, pick-me, seeking validation. Scenario B, woman rejects male attention, pick-me, strategic self-presentation to seem unavailable. Scenario C, woman ignores male attention entirely, pick-me, performatively indifferent to seem superior to other women. Every possible response to male attention is reinterpreted as pick-me. The term is non-falsifiable.
It does not describe a pattern of behavior. It imposes a pattern on all behavior. Why Dr. Winona cannot answer. She tries, she would stop performing for the male gaze. But the question anticipates this. How would that look different from what she is already doing? If a woman says, I have stopped performing for the male gaze, Dr. Winona can say that statement is itself a performance.
There is no exit. The doctor has built a panopticon of judgment from which no woman can escape by any behavior, any statement, any thought. This is not analysis. It is epistemic tyranny. The child's version, if she says no to a boy, is she still fake? Yes, according to the ideology, she is. And that is the reductio. Axis IV, the economic value of male validation. Best question, if male validation is a scarce resource, is pick-me behavior a rational economic strategy or an irrational social mistake? Grammatical basis. This question tests the proper categorization of an act. Is seeking male validation an economic behavior, rational response to scarcity, or a psychological defect, irrational self-betrayal? The grammar demands we place it in one category or the other, not both. Logical basis, this is a modus tollens P1. If pick-me behavior is irrational, then women who engage in it are acting against their interests. P2. If male validation is a real good, which the existence of the critique implies, see Section 2, then seeking it is not against one's interests. C. Therefore, pick-me behavior is not irrational. C2. Therefore, the pick-me critique condemns rational behavior, which means the critique is anti-woman. Why, doctor?
Winona cannot answer. She tries to have it both ways. The pick-me woman is a victim not responsible, whose behavior is a survival strategy. Rational, but also inauthentic, condemnable.
But if the behavior is a rational survival strategy, then condemning it is condemning survival. If it is a victim's trauma response, then shaming the victim for her response is cruelty. The doctor wants to simultaneously pathologize the behavior, excuse the woman, and condemn the system. But these three moves are mutually incompatible. You cannot say she can't help it and she should know better, and it's the system's fault in the same breath without contradiction. Follow-up question: why is the woman who trades validation for status selling out, but the man who trades status for validation buying in? Why this detonates? This returns us to the master question with devastating clarity. The economic framing reveals the double standard as transactional asymmetry. The same exchange is judged differently depending on the gender of the seller. In no other market is the seller condemned and the buyer praised for participating in the same transaction. Imagine condemning a farmer for selling wheat while praising the baker for buying it. The ideology would protest, but the farmer didn't create the market, neither did the baker. Both are participants, both are responding to price signals. Condemning one and praising the other is not structural analysis. It is gendered moral accounting. Axis V, the exclusion of male agency in the dynamic. Best question: if the pick-me woman is performing for men, why are men not also performing for women? And why is their performance not labeled pick-me? Grammatical basis. This tests symmetry of predication. If performing for the opposite sex is the criterion, it must apply to both sexes, or the criterion requires a principal gender-specific modifier. The ideology does not provide one that survives scrutiny. Logical basis. This is a category error detection. The pick-me framework treats a dyadic interaction, mutual performance between sexes as a monadic property, one woman's behavior, but performance requires an audience. If a woman performs for men, men are constitutive of the performance, not passive props, but active participants whose presence, attention, and validation are the material cause of the behavior. Removing male agency from the analysis is like analyzing a conversation by studying only one speaker. Why, Dr.?
Winona cannot answer. She acknowledges men exist, men who pursue female validation, but immediately deflects into structural analysis, different incentive structure. The question is not about incentive structures.
It is about whether the act is the same act. If a man lifts weights to attract women, he is performing for the female gaze. If a woman wears makeup to attract men, she is performing for the male gaze. These are the same act calibrating self-presentation for the opposite sex's preferences. The ideology calls one self-improvement and the other inauthenticity. That asymmetry is not derived from the act. It is imposed by the theory. Axis Zix, the contradiction of choice in ideological markets. Best question: can the label change if the woman keeps the money? Grammatical basis. This tests the independence of the judgment from its consequences. If the pick-me label is about authenticity and internal state, then external outcomes should not affect the judgment. If the label shifts based on whether the woman benefits materially, then the label is about economic resentment, not authenticity. Logical basis. This is a counterfactual test. Case A. Woman performs femininity for male attention, receives validation only. Pick me. Case B. Woman performs femininity for male attention, monetizes it on OnlyFans. If case B is also pick me, then the judgment is about the act of seeking male attention, regardless of benefit, and the economic framing is irrelevant. If case B is not pick me because she is using the system, then the judgment is about who profits, and the authenticity framing is a cover for economic resentment. Why, Dr.?
Winona cannot answer, because the ideology splits on this point. Sex-positive feminists say case B is empowering. Radical feminists say case B is worse, commodification of the self.
The pick-me label cannot be both a structural critique, in which case monetization either fixes or worsens the problem, and an authenticity critique, in which case monetization is irrelevant. The ideology contains two incompatible theories wearing the same vocabulary, and the question forces them into the open, the child test. I have a principle: if you cannot explain your idea to a child, the idea does not understand itself. Complexity is not depth. Obscurity is not rigor. If your theory cannot survive translation into simple language, your theory is protecting itself from examination through verbal armor. So let us translate the entire debate. Child's version of the winning question: why is it bad for a girl to sell her toys to boys, but good for a boy to buy them? Picture a schoolyard. Girls have toys boys want. Boys have toys girls want. Everyone trades. Everyone modifies their behavior to make trades happen. You display your best toys. You act friendly. You show interest in what the other person has. Now an adult walks up and says to a girl, "You're being fake. You're only acting nice because you want that boy's toy. That's not who you really are," the girl asks. "But Jimmy is acting nice because he wants my toy. Why is he okay?" The adult says, "Because Jimmy has structural entitlement." The child blinks. "But I thought you said everyone should be able to trade." They should, but when you trade, you're being inauthentic. What does that mean? It means you're not being yourself. I am being myself. I want the toy. No, you've been conditioned to want the toy. By who? By the system. Did the system condition Jimmy too? Jimmy is in a different incentive structure. The child stares at the adult with the unclouded clarity that only children possess. "You just don't want me to trade with boys." That is what the child sees. That is what the theory conceals. The pick-me discourse is not about authenticity. It is about controlling women's access to men. It is about dictating the terms on which women may engage with male attention, daring that engagement itself is suspect, that desire itself is pathology, that the only authentic woman is the one who does not want what men have to offer. But women do want what men have to offer. Not all women, not all the time, not in the same ways, but the desire is real, it is natural, and it is theirs. They did not choose it the way you choose a brand of cereal, they chose it the way you choose to breathe. It is woven into the architecture of human nature. The pick-me critique pathologizes that architecture. It tells women that their desire for men is not their own, that it was installed by a system, that their preferences are software, that their hunger is a virus. And it tells them this while offering nothing in return except the cold comfort of ideological purity, the sterile satisfaction of being correct in the eyes of women who have made a religion of their own resentment. P1. A just standard applies equally to comparable acts. P2. Men seeking female validation and women seeking male validation are comparable acts. Both involve calibrating self-presentation for the opposite sex's preferences. P3. The pick-me label applies only to the latter. P4. No principled distinction survives scrutiny. Structural context addresses moral weight, not authenticity. Incentive structure addresses cause, not virtue. C. The pick-me label is an unjust standard. It applies a double standard to female desire and calls the double standard feminism. The question stands. It will continue to stand. It does not need my rhetoric to sustain it. It is a fact of logic that asymmetrical judgment without principled distinction is unjust. No amount of theory, credentials, or institutional weight can make injustice just. The logos does not bend.
She would stop performing for the male gaze, Dr. Winona says. But the entire point is that there is no stopping.
There is no behavior, no preference, no choice a woman can make that the ideology cannot reframe as performance. The demand to stop performing is a demand to cease existing as a desiring being. It is the demand that a woman amputate her nature to satisfy a theory that denies her nature exists. That is not liberation. That is annihilation dressed as consciousness raising.
And the men watching this spectacle, the ones Dr. Winona dismisses with that signature male logic smugness, they see it clearly. They see women turning on each other over who is allowed to want male attention.
They see the surveillance, the policing, the accusation, the social exile. and they recognize it for what it is, the same female competition for status that has existed since the beginning of our species, now wearing academic robes and calling itself justice. The male gaze did not create the pick-me discourse. The female gaze did. Women watching women, women judging women, women punishing women for the crime of wanting what women have always wanted, and daring not to be ashamed of it. The question is on the table. It will remain on the table, and no amount of structural vocabulary will ever sweep it off. If male attention is the currency of the market, why is selling it inauthentic but buying it empowering? Answer the question, or admit you cannot. You have now seen the fault line that the entire architecture rests upon, and you cannot unsee it. The contradiction is not a glitch in their reasoning, it is their reasoning naked and exposed. The same attention that is treated as a plunderable resource, when extracted from men, is called oppression the moment a man withholds it, redirects it, or attaches conditions to its expenditure. If male attention is the gold standard of the social market and their own behavior confesses that it is, then the man who knows its value is not a manipulator. He is a sovereign mint. The woman who packages and sells that attention's recipients back to themselves is not empowered. She is a middleman who has convinced the mind that it works for her. So here is your weapon, forged and ready. The next time someone tells you that male desire is dangerous, controlling, or inherently objectifying, ask the question with the calm precision of a surgeon laying a scalpel across the table. If male attention is the currency of the market, why is selling it called empowerment but buying it called exploitation? Watch what happens. They will not answer because there is no answer that survives the logic. They will deflect, emote, accuse, or change the subject, every single evasion confirming what you already know. A question that cannot be answered without self-destruction is not just an argument, it is a key. And you now hold it. Sponsored book, The Penis Envy Pyramid, Dissecting the Feminist Complex. Men are in crisis. You feel it every time society calls you toxic for defending your family, every time a divorce court loots your life's work, every time you're told to man up while being stripped of the right to define what that means. I wrote this book because I watched brothers, fathers, and sons collapse under the weight of a lie, the lie that equality between men and women is possible, natural, or even desirable. Biology isn't a social construct. Testosterone isn't a toxin, and no amount of hashtag activism will rewrite the evolutionary code that made men conquerors, innovators, and protectors. This isn't theory, it's survival. I've sat with men who worked 80-hour weeks, only to lose their children to courts that labeled them unfit for prioritizing provision over pillow fights. I've tracked data feminists buried like the 73% spike in male suicides since the 1980s sensitivity crusade began. I've watched boys raised on participation trophies become hollowed out betas, begging for scraps of attention from women who'd rather share an alpha than own a simp. The truth, modern feminism isn't about equality. It's about revenge, a collective tantrum thrown by women haunted by the specter of their own biological limitations. This book is for men who are tired of apologies. Men who see through the girl boss charade, who recognize that toxic masculinity is just code for traits we need but won't admit to. You'll learn why Gloria Steinem's daddy issues birthed an anti-male cult, how Sheryl Sandberg's pantsuits scream penis envy, and why marriage has become legalized suicide. You'll discover why countries pushing gender neutrality breed fatherless criminals, why 92% of female CEOs are childless, and how to reclaim the dominance your ancestors wielded, if you're content being a disposable ATM. A politically correct eunuch or a martyr on feminism's altar of grievances. Stop reading now. Go binge Netflix's latest male-bashing cartoon. This book isn't for the castrated, the compliant, or the woke. But if you're ready to dissect the electrocomplex driving feminist hysterics, to crush the wage gap myth with Bureau of Labor Statistics receipts, and to escape the marriage plantation's chains, turn the page. Your evolutionary right to lead, protect, and thrive starts here. No apologies, no retreat, no kittens harmed. The Penis Envy Pyramid, Dissecting the Feminist Complex, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.